Good morning and welcome. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is George Havakis, and I'm the Managing Director of GISA International, who are the creators and managers of A-SPEC. So, today I have the pleasure of leading this forum and taking you through our observations and guidance for addressing all things O-SPEC. If you want to know a little bit more about me, you can click on that QR code. For the people that have missed previous forums that we've run, so this is the third one, those sessions have been recorded and will be made available post the end of this forum series on our YouTube channel, and you'll receive a link to access those. So, some housekeeping. We're always conscious of professional learning, and to date we have Surveyors Registration Board of Victoria and the Land Surveyors Licensing Board of Western Australia who have recognised these forums, and we're really appreciative of that. And where it says 1 point for each, it's 1 point per hour of attendance. So essentially, by attending the whole of this session, you'll be eligible for 1.5 points. And we offer certificates of attendance for the people that have been part of this. If you want to show that to your association, to your relevant association, so that you can be eligible for the CPD points. Just send us an email and we'll arrange that for you. As I mentioned, questions will occur during the sessions. We'd love you to respond. However, if you're more comfortable listening, we'd love that too. Each time you see a cog or a head and the cogs, that will signal that a poll will be run, and the polls will be closed at the end of the forums. They are anonymous polls, so we don't really know who has made any comments or who has voted for what. And again, when we talk about the live Q&A, feel free to put a comment in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that, and I'll respond to that as we go along. And also, don't hesitate to put up your digital hand to signify that you would like to make a comment. Take yourself off mute. I'll only control the mute button if there's background noise that may be impacting the presentations. So here's the structure of our forums. We talk about what's going on right now, what our observations have been. There'll be community experiences, and that happens in 2 ways. One, we will have a presentation from Naomi Patterson from MNG Group in WA, who'll be sharing with us her experience of addressing A-SPEC data and maybe some tricks and traps that come along the way. Then we'll wrap things up with what's next and where to now. So I'm about to start the presentation. So I'm going to turn off my camera just to save some bandwidth. Okay, so let's get straight into it. There's been quite a lot that goes on behind the scenes, as you can imagine, when it comes to maintaining standard specifications. We have a fairly busy team dealing with everything from communication to providing access. So these are all sort of the intangibles that make things work. We promote that A-SPEC is a knowledge sharing community. So wherever possible, we like to communicate what is going on. So from a more technical perspective, we're always looking at anomalies, clearing up anomalies, and we're really grateful that there's a number of organizations and specifically individuals who always provide us with that feedback. So very appreciative of that. So we look at what the kind of impacts are, minor and not impactful to delivery. So, you know, we may have a typo in a description, for example, or something that's important and impactful to delivery because we've missed off something from the specification side, and I'll give you a couple of examples of that. From an O-Spec perspective, there are very few issues that we've identified, which is a great thing. It just shows the kind of work that goes on in the background. Post this series, we will be updating the sample data. We've done a deep dive into the sample data, and one of our interns, Zayu, has done quite a bit of work to address how the sample data is, remove anomalies, and make sure that anything that may be missing has been included. So that updated sample data set will be available post this forum session as well, and be available on the website. There's a lot of work that we do in our codes. It's constant. So whilst the specifications have two aspects to it. One is the attributes, which we set for a period of time and will only change through a formal review, whereas we know that with the codes and the code lists, there's ongoing work to do that. So they're quite dynamic. And I'll talk quite a bit more about that. And I've got quite a bit on advocacy on data governance and the benefits of it, that from our perspective, what we promote to the organizations that take on the specs. Okay, so we talk about some of the anomalies. Now, on the A-SPEC proposed changes page of the website, you can see that there is a sheet there. There's a couple of links there. A-SPEC V5 consolidated changes 2023-09-04. That is a list of all of the consolidated changes that we have made across all of the specifications. So you can download that. And also there's an A-SPEC addendum. So what we found was that once the specs were in play, there was a number of anomalies that we found and that were identified by the community, and we're really grateful for that. So we issued an addendum in 2024, so we'd really like you to have a look at that. So if you're the new kid on the block and you haven't been made aware of this, once you have your login, you can go to that particular page and you can download those two documents. Now, I talked about some anomalies, but I also want to make some clarification. Last year, for those of you that were on, will know that I wasn't around and we had a number of guest facilitators who did a great job. So I had a look at the video of the recording from last year, and I can see that I've actually caused a little bit of confusion around the topic of poles and bollards. So what I'm showing you here is that, have I got this out of whack? I may have this out of whack. Actually, I won't talk about that just yet. I'll talk about bollards in a moment, right? But so let me just go back a sec. Anomalies. So the top one where it says piles, so you can see that we said central location of the step. Obviously incorrect. This was identified by Veris, and we recently changed that to be central location of the pile. Now we know that that's not going to have a big impact on the deliverable, because when people go to the piles table, everything is assessed, is addressed correctly there. So this is us tidying up the typos. Now, potentially where there is an impact is where we have unit reference in the polls table. So we've got the attribute there, we refer to a code list, and what we noticed was that when we published the PDF document, we didn't have the unit of measure reference code list there. And this was picked up by another contributor, OpenSpatial, and who are always great at providing us with feedback. And this is part of the addendum to show where these changes. So this potentially could have quite an impact, particularly for the new starters in the community who are not used to this structure as yet. So I wanted to show that as the kind of anomalies, and I will get back to talking about bollards in just a moment. Now, what I do want to do is talk about crowdsourcing of codes. So I want to show you, I've created this little video clip about a code generator tool that we're in the process of launching on the website, on the A-SPEC website, and this will be available once you have your login. So the objective of this is, there's a number of objectives. Firstly, we want to empower the community through crowdsourcing of the generation of codes so that they don't have to wait for it. Now, we know that there's going to be a time saving with it, and it also will provide guidance to us, as in GISA, and also the asset owner when they get the details and they see the C comment field in the code, in the attribute, and then they go to the comments field and they see what the actual code is. So we want to, whilst our overall objective might be in the long term to remove the C comment field, we want to use it in conjunction with a code that is generated. So I'm going to fire up this video, and actually I've just realized I've made a small mistake, so I've got to stop sharing and enable my screen again so that I've got sound. So just bear with me for a moment while I do that. Okay, now that should be okay. So Naomi, if I could ask you just to give me a digital thumbs up once I start the video to let me know if you can hear the volume, that would be great. The purpose of this clip is to give you a snapshot into what we're looking at for crowdsourcing the creation of codes. As you know, C comment is one of the valid entries. We want to remove it. Now there's a bit of a delay in my video, so just bear with me for a sec. In doing that, we also want to give the community an opportunity to create the codes when they need them. So this is how it would work. You search for a code list. I've selected my code list. I'm looking at all of the different options that are available. And I can't find it. So I'm going to search something in there. Vegetable plantings.
vegetable plantings doesn't exist. By selecting this, it automatically reads the description and at the same time gives me a couple of options. I'm going to pick one of them, and it's based on this criteria highlighted below. I pick one of them. I put in my username or user ID, and this is so that we can have an indication of where the activity is coming from. And we add a code to a code list. We continue. I now have the option to add more. I'm going to select make more changes. I go back to the start. I'm going to search for a different code, access point material. I'm looking through my access point material to see what is there, and I'm going to reinforced concrete, and by typing that in, I can see all of the options that I've got for reinforced concrete. I know that RC already exists, so I'm going to select RC1. This automatically adds it to the code list. I now see all of the changes. Satisfied with that, I send an email notification to GISA. GISA receives an email with these changes. I send the email. The session's complete.
Okay, so that's, in simple terms, that's the way that this application would work. It's going to be available for use on a smart device or desktop. And whilst I said that we want to remove the use of C comment, that's not going to be completely practical. So what we've identified is that following discussions with some people after the A-SPEC forum, we realized that it could actually create a bottleneck for people who are putting in submissions, particularly with to organizations that have validation tools that, such as ACDC or the GDV Hub, or others that may have created routines internally, so that they are not impacted. The generated code created by the data creator is placed in the comments field and then uses C comment in the attribute field. So that's the intention of how this would be applied. Okay, so as I was saying previously, I reviewed the video for the previous session of last year's forum, so I thought I'd just spend a little bit of time recapping on the conversation. So there's a series of questions fielded by GISA, and one of those was pertaining to bollards for mooring vessels. Another one was related to hard surfaces, and also the ongoing conversation about codes. So the question was, what type of asset is on the left-hand side? So, firstly, I want to apologize. I thought I was certain about what it was, but following further research, it's clear to me that the posts shown on the image on the left-hand side are in fact a type of bollard in the marine sense, but they're actually a mooring pile. So I've also put in a picture of marine bollards, so the typical bollards that we would see on wharves and piers. So the distinction is that a mooring pile is usually secured into the ground, whereas a bollard is secured on the wharf or pier infrastructure. So now, as a result of this, we're now proposing an additional attribute in the table jetties, piers, and marinas. So we can be clear about how do vessels moor against that infrastructure. So we're looking at creating this attribute, moor underscore type. So it'll come from a code list, and in the code list we will have these kinds of options. So the research that I've done is that these are the typical options that are found. And again, we have the C comment field there. And if there isn't an asset type feature already listed in the code list, you can add that. So if there's any questions or comments, yes, buts, what ifs about that, please add that to the chat, and I'll address that when it rises. Or feel free to put your hand up as well. Code list name. So we want to get some feedback from you as our community, because essentially you're at the coalface. We can make all of these suggestions at our end, but what we want to get a sense of is there an impact to you, and what kind of impact, and what kind of support you may require to take you through this process. So we've got 2 polls that are coming up, which we'd like you to respond to, please. So here's the first one. So in this question, we're talking about, we're endeavoring to harmonize the naming of code lists across all of the specifications as much as we are harmonizing the codes across all of the specifications. So we'd like to know if you consider that it would have any kind of impact on you, minor or major. And if you have no comment, no problem. Happy for that as well. But please take a little bit of time to respond to that, and we'd be much appreciated. Okay, so people who have indicated that there is a major impact, I'm happy for you to put into the chat so that we can have an open discussion, or contact me privately through my direct email, or through the info@GISA email. Please don't hesitate to do that. We don't, you've raised it, it's important to you. We want to make sure that we cover off the impact of changing a code list name. So, I can make some assumptions about it, about what that impact would be. However, I'd like to know if there's some commonality around the potential impacts. So thank you again for contributing to this conversation. So the second poll is, what's the best way to support you? So feel free to type in a statement, a word, how it might be, how you want it to be communicated to you, via email or other means. So please don't hesitate. Yep, great. Email, fantastic. We have a CRM that we typically use to communicate issues with you. Yep, all right. So we can see that email is the common approach. Much appreciated. I'll leave this on for another 10 seconds, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Okay. Yep, fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for your contribution. Feel free, this Menti poll will still be up if you want to contribute during the presentation. Okay, so I'm going to up the pace a bit now so that we can start getting through some of the content. So overall, our intention and responsibility is to manage one code list across all the specifications. The most current master code list can be downloaded from the A-SPEC website. And again, there are some changes being made to it, and that will be put on post these forums. I've listed three key facts that I'd like you to take into account. And probably one of the critical ones is that the first point. So whilst there are codes published in each specification, that's a snapshot in time. So the codes, so the specifications that were published in September 2023 had all the codes that had been included, modified, removed up until that point in time. Similarly, the codes that were relevant in 2019 had been updated up to the May 2019 when that release occurred. So you can see that there's quite a bit of a gap between 2019 and the 2023 releases. So so it stands to reason that there's going to be some movement there. So to give you a sense of the kind of things to know about the code. So for example, there's going to be some codes that were relevant in 2019 that are no longer relevant in 2023. So if you are one of the few organizations still receiving data in the 2019 version, then if you get a fence or / wall table and under purpose, you'll see that in 2019, retaining was a valid entry. Okay. However, what we identified was that as we had retaining walls, it sort of defeated the purpose of having a fence as having a retaining feature and then retaining walls. So that's an anomaly that we want to clear up pretty much straight away if people hadn't already picked it up. Another thing that you'll see is that in 2019 we had amenity type of flagpole. Now in 2023 we created a new asset class called poles. So therefore flagpole became a redundant code in the amenity type, and it can be recorded as a pole and its purpose recorded there. Also, other important aspects is that when there's a new asset class, it often comes with new code lists. And as we published in 2023, they're only available for the 2023 versions. So again, it's really important to be clear about which version of the A-SPEC you are adopting to incorporate into your deliverable. By now, we anticipate that nearly everybody is receiving 2023 data or 2023 A-SPEC compliant data. So we're going to have, in 2023, we're going to have new attributes. So in this case, in the area work extent, EPSG with a code list. So there's a typical example of where there's a new code list that's been created because there's a new attribute that's been created. In this particular example, we've got also construction type, a new attribute created in an existing table, which then created a code list. So again, it's relevant for 2023 onwards. So we want to be clear that you are aware of these particular changes, and it may be that all of the codes that were created at the time that the document was published and not all of the codes that are available as of this point in time. We also had a conversation and recently had a question about when should hard stand be used and when do you use hard landscaping? So I've given you a couple of what I think are clear examples. So for example, on the left is you'll see a lot of containers there. So hard stands are typically a paved area designed to withstand heavy loads. Okay, and we've listed what it's commonly used for. Whereas hard landscaping typically refers to, as we've indicated there, non-plant material, such as concreting. Now, not to be confused with a pathway, so you can see a couple of pathways coming through here. So the pathways are different to hard landscaping. So we want you to be clear about that particular aspect of it. Now, new conversation. This is about marine safety or marine and maritime assets. So I've got 2 polls coming up. And so what we want to get a sense of is for those asset owners that have assets around that are maritime and marine type assets. We want to get some feedback from you about whether we create a dedicated spec for maritime and marine assets or not. Again, feel free to put in a comment into the chat. Okay. So you know that on the law of averages, when someone says yes to something, then it's likely that I will want to follow up with you to find out, okay, what else? What else can we include? So I get that they are quite substantial assets and that we may need to maybe we have an M-SPEC. Who knows? We've got plenty of letters in the alphabet. So what we'll do is, given that there's a good level of interest around whether to create a dedicated spec or not, we'll follow up with an email to everyone and to get your feedback. And again, I encourage the people that are saying yes to contact us to give us some more detail. So in this particular Menti, what we're looking for is we've got a number of assets that are covered in O-Spec. Are there other asset types not covered by O-Spec for maritime and marine assets that we should include, and therefore it may result in the creation of the new spec? And this is just a free text field, so feel free to just pop something in. If it's none, put in none. If you say O-Spec is okay for now, then put in O-Spec is okay for now. So whatever your thought is, that's what we want to capture. So I'll give people another 10 seconds to address that. A recent inquiry about poles and lighting, and a request about how to address it. So there's 2 questions here. So we've split. So the initial sentence at the top was the inquiry that came in from the industry, and we've split it up into 2 parts. So for the first part, critical thing, first and foremost, ask the asset owner to get some direction. They'll give you an indication of of the level of detail that they want captured. Now, if the answer is yes, then you want to utilize the following two tables that are in O-Spec. Service lines and service points. That will cover the electrical lines and the electrical pits. Now, in terms of actual lighting poles, O-Spec has a poles table, so you can utilize that. So, whereas A-SPEC has lighting, so the combination of the two will give you what's required for the asset owner. So this now comes with a pole. Actually, it comes with two poles. So here's the first question. So I want you to put your thinking caps on. If you're recording a pole and lighting, how many objects would you capture? Okay, so we can see that the trend is towards one asset. Okay, I'll give it another 10 seconds, and then I'll talk to that before we go on to the next part. All right, so thank you again for everybody that's responded to this poll. The actual answer to that is 2, because you've got a pole asset and you've got a lighting asset. Now they're both point features, which means that they would sit on top of each other, right? So if it's something that we need to review, I'll take it on board to see if maybe there's something else that we need to address that has everybody thinking that it's one asset versus two assets. But our advice is to capture it as two assets. Now, we always talk about data governance, or we talk about governance in two aspects, data and process. So this is something that we've built into all of the forums so far. So I just want to reinforce this. For people who are new to A-SPEC, one of the key things that we want you to address is downloading this particular document from the website. This is the overview document. So if you go onto the A-SPEC website, you can type in overview in the search box and download this document. Now, the benefit of this document is it has a lot of details in there. So it's a companion document to all the specifications, which means there's information in here which isn't provided in other documents. So, for example, the responsibilities of the consultant. So we outline here what the responsibilities of the developer/consultant are, or if the developer engages a surveyor, or the developer engages a consulting engineer to supervise all the works, who then engages the surveyor. So what we've endeavored to do is cover all of these aspects. Now, if you go to the top part, the developer consultant, and you go to the second last point, it talks about ensuring the data is supplied within 15 working days of work being completed, unless otherwise agreed with a relevant consortium member. So this gives you, as the data provider, an opportunity to communicate with the asset owner to say, look, here's by when we will provide this data. And we're not talking defer by months. It may be a week or 2 weeks, or maybe 3 weeks past the time of practical completion. So the point is that statement is there to give you the opportunity have that conversation. And I know from previous discussions that I've had with other consultants that the comment comes back, yes, but the council is holding me to a clearance or a statement of compliance. They won't provide it unless, or a certificate of practical completion, unless I give them the data. And it's, from a practical perspective, we know that it's not necessarily captured at practical completion. The capture often happens post practical completion. So it's important to continue with those conversations. And if you're having any specific issues, then please let me know about it so that I'm happy to wade into the conversation. Similarly, from a consortium member's perspective, they will also have timelines to respond. So as you can see at the bottom here, we've got developments of a particular size to enable a certain period of time. And again, we've got times there that are recommended for the delivery of results back to the consultant. So that's if the data's not compliant, it's missed something or it's erroneous, get back to the consultant. So both of these aspects talk to the integrity of the process and the opportunity for conversations. It's not about the technical aspect. We all know that everybody can do the work. This is about creating the conversation about the practicalities of delivering the data in a specified time frame. So it's important to have those conversations. Become familiar with this table. We are increasingly of the view that the asset and asset data handover process is critical to have a checklist associated with it. So this is identified in the overview document. We also have a checklist, and the asset and asset data handover checklist is designed to be utilized for both subdivision developments. So that process is communicated to the developer by the council for the developer to identify what assets they're likely to deliver. That way the council knows what data to expect of what assets. And similarly, for capital works, then it's the responsibility of the council or the agency that's subscribing to the specs to complete that for their capital works projects. And as you can see, there's opportunity to write down the type of project it is and also to sign off on it. Now, we know that this is a piece of paper, and we know that there's business as usual, and there's a lot of activity that goes on when during projects, and we don't want to add this as just another thing to do. But what we're identifying is, from our observations of doing the work as well as implementing A-SPEC with councils, is that there's a big gap in understanding what assets a council is going to end up with. So this checklist was actually requested by a council many years ago to be formed so they could include it as part of their process. And for capital works, it's actually, for many councils, it's incorporated as part of their project management framework. And that's how we advocate for it. So our tip, inspect versus expect. Okay, so here's an example of a checklist that we requested from a client identifying the assets that needed to be delivered. Now, in this particular case, it was a B-spec project, and it had a number of other areas associated because it was a precinct. So there was basins, you can see, there's amenities, but also on the right-hand side, it talks about electrical cabling for S&W. Now, we know that this particular council doesn't subscribe to S&W. So it was a case of inspecting what they thought had to be delivered and then determining, you actually meant electrical lines, which wasn't called electrical cabling. So we may actually change that to electrical cabling to reflect that. So when we do that kind of inspection and have that conversation, then we know that what they actually meant was the electrical lines associated with the building. So it's really important, and it gives you some clarity about what to expect. So here's the next poll. There's a particular trend that we've identified in the last couple of forums. Great. I love it that someone is using the checklist. And if you're not using it, that's okay. What we're advocating for is to start considering how you could incorporate that checklist as part of your process of assessing a subdivision development or assessing a capital works project. And if you'd like some assistance with that, don't hesitate to contact us, because that's the kind of work that we do on a regular basis. So thank you so much for the people that have contributed. So that's 18 of 27 that are on the poll. So that's a very good response. And I'm keen to, by this time next year, that this changes around so that we've got the majority are in the yes. That's my goal for next year. And it's on record, so we'll see how we go. We always talk about the certification form. There's a lot of important information on this certification form, and it's really data about data. So call it metadata, call it a README file, call it what you like. What we're suggesting is that this actually needs to be provided so that it forms part of the handover process. Now, when we're talking about an area work extent boundary, we'll talk about two aspects, the boundary and the asset recording. So you can see in 2019, we had a particular issue where if assets were outside of the boundary, it caused an issue for the asset owners in trying to allocate what assets were actually part of that project, particularly if you have abutting projects. So in 2023, we created Area Works ID. So it no longer matters if the asset extends past the boundary. The key thing is that this Area Works ID is included within every table. Now, if you're also in regards to what happens in that kind of precinct, with your login, also on the proposed changes page, there is a listing there of all the councils or organisations subscribe to the specs and which specs they subscribe to. And in some instances, we have a dedicated A-SPEC email. So through your login, you can access that to get clarity. Now, what kind of survey do I need to do? So we need to look at existing assets or new assets. So we're looking at what needs to be captured in the field versus what captured in the office. Now we know that when you're doing your set out, or you're about to go out into the field to do your field capture, then this will be done in the office. However, when you're out in the field, you may only need to verify information about those things. So it's important to look at what you actually need to do out in the field. Now, for the most part, in my conversations with the organisations that have been doing this for some time, then they've got that sorted. But if you need some guidance on it, don't hesitate to contact us. Because the other thing that you need to take into account is that if it's an existing asset, then we've got an extra column here that determines the importance of capturing that particular attribute. So, so you can see here This is all new assets. So this is the DDS version. So this is the existing asset. So why are yes, required, and may need more research. It may come up that there's no response. So rather than the field cannot be empty, the value might be in there, information not available. So important for you to have a look at the bigger picture and distinguish between what you need to do for existing assets versus what you need to do for new assets. Now, last week we asked what kind of conversations you'd like to have in follow-up forums, and one of the topics was data for capital works projects. So I've created this very simple diagram of a workflow, and I'm happy to have a conversation about this during the wrap-up time, because I'm now eating into some of Naomi's time, but it's okay, Naomi. I'm going to release you onto the community shortly in a couple of more slides. So first and foremost, identify what kind of project you are doing. Is it an existing asset for capital works where it's a like-for-like replacement? In which case, yeah, we still want you to complete the checklist. However, the deliverable may be a form that's created by your organization to update the attributes. And they may be based on A-SPEC attributes, which is the link to the A-SPEC or O-SPEC in this regard. However, it's an updating process rather than someone needing to look through invoices, try to work out quantities, try to work out what has actually been done where. You've already got the location of the asset. It's got an asset ID. You may retire and create a new asset ID. That's by the by. But if it's a like for like, it's a simpler process. If it's a renewal or reconstruction, then you complete the checklist again to identify the assets that are going to be delivered, and then there's a capture of the location, so there's a GIS object, and the attributes. So essentially, we want to differentiate the amount of effort and create the awareness with the project managers as well as the surveyors out there and others who are capturing this data as to what is expected, what is the intention of capturing data for existing assets versus capturing data for newly constructed assets. If you have any questions, again, please put it into the chat and I will address it during the wrap-up time. Okay, other activities. We have a partnership called Digital Hive, which is with Whereabouts Consulting, and our principal for that is Cappy van Fake, as he is the lead in this business, but I'm also actively involved. We also have a joint venture with One Spatial via the Digital Hive entity, where we've created a data validation and correction tool. This is a SaaS product. If you'd like to know more about it, don't hesitate to contact us. So just leading up to, we talked about 21 years, so I'm about to come to you, Naomi, for your presentation. So there's a couple of slides, or there's a few slides here that I just wanted to talk about. So this is where it all began 21 years ago. So this is the very first version of what was then D-SPEC, and it was created for a data capture process for Wyndham City Council. And our very first version was launched in October on the 21st in 2004. And as you can see, 37 pages. So of those four initial councils, four founding councils, 3 are still with us. So I'm pretty happy about that around the relevance of the specifications. And where we're at now, fast forward to 2025, this is what the suite involves. Now, Naomi, I'm going to stop sharing now, so feel free to set yourself up. What I do want to talk about is, look, in the context of, I'll let Naomi do a mini intro of herself because she's quite an impressive person. But essentially, Naomi works for MNG, and incidentally, MNG, as I mentioned earlier, were the very first surveying company in WA to deliver D-SPEC data. So whilst Naomi was not with MNG at that time, I invited her to present today and share with us some of her observations and maybe a tip or two about O-SPEC submissions. So Naomi, welcome, and over to you.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, all good. I can.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And the slides all showing up nicely on the screen?
Yes, lovely.
Perfect. Okay, hi, I'm Naomi Patterson and I'm the team leader for Survey Computing, a team responsible for creating all the A-SPEC deliverables at M&G Surveys in WA. Like many of my team, I'm a surveyor who drafts, which means we're detail orientated. I've been drafting A-SPECs for 5 years now, so I've only seen 2 revisions of the spec thus far. If you were hoping for a deep dive in the technical breakdown of the A-SPEC, I'm sorry to disappoint, we've only got 15 minutes. So I figured it was better to share a light-hearted but real-world perspective that comes with preparing O-SPEC data from a surveyor's point of view. So my presentation is called O-SPEC, Common Challenges Faced by Consultants, Field, Frustration and Final Files, a Surveyor's Tale. So for those that are not familiar with O-SPEC, O-SPEC is a standard specification used to capture information about open space and recreational reserves, essentially the areas of the development where the public get to enjoy the outdoors. But open space covers everything from modest buffer zones to major civic projects like Elizabeth Quay here in Perth, which we at M&G have been involved in since 2007, but I'll discuss that in more detail a little later. It is the scale of the works that makes a big difference to the surveyor and especially with their time and their sanity. A small buffer zone or a streetscape might only cover 200 attributed elements, things like trees, landscaping and sprinklers. But a large-scale park or sporting reserve can easily be 2,000 elements, all of which need to be identified, attributed and mapped accurately. When I was asked to give this presentation, I figured it was best to reacquaint myself with the O-SPEC manual. At first glance, it looked quite manageable, having around the same number of attributes as the R and B specs, with 27 asset categories. And it was quite a few pages less than the A-SPEC. Thankfully, most specs don't include all these categories, but some definitely give it a red hot go. But then I realised O-SPEC borrows from other specs like the A-SPEC, so it has the potential to get huge and hard to manage. Then you have to consider the range of people involved. O-SPEC involves landscapers and irrigation designers on top of the usual engineers and contractors. Suddenly you're dealing with a whole cast of characters, each with a role to play. So with multiple specs stitched together and many bodies involved, O-SPEC becomes the Frankenstein's monster of specs. Throw in some irrigation, then some lighting, a handful of trees and landscaping, and voila, the O-SPEC comes alive. I approach O-SPEC with a healthy level of caution because my very first one was a trial by fire. It was Halesworth Park in the city of Wanneroo, a sprawling 12-hectare site that had a bit of everything. It had picnic shelters with amenities, sporting ovals, cricket nets, hard courts, playground equipment, gym equipment, little athletic infrastructure. The list goes on. Well, it didn't have everything. There wasn't a swimming pool. But that begs the question, where would a swimming pool be categorised in A-SPEC? I would love to know. But what it did consist of was over 3,000 individual elements, 2,000 relating to irrigation, which were manually assigned and attributed. As I was creating this O-SPEC, I did wonder, what did I do to deserve this? It took me personally 80 hours to draft and 380 hours in total to complete, including the fieldwork. By the end, I was overwhelmed and traumatised. I felt stitched up by my colleagues, but in fairness, it truly was a proper introduction to O-SPEC. When it comes to O-SPECs, the responsibility of pulling it all together, surveying the site, coordinating the data, preparing the attributes, and delivering the final product often falls to the surveyor. Traditionally, GIS isn't in our job description. Fieldwork, precision, accuracy, sure, that's our bread and butter, but GIS is a whole different beast. Creating O-SPEC requires different skill sets. You become a strange hybrid of a mind reader, detective, botanist, artist, data analyst. Curtin University prepared me for a lot of things, but identifying ornamental plum trees or deciphering irrigation was certainly not on the syllabus. Luckily, surveyors are, if not anything, but resourceful, so we make it work. So how do surveyors deliver accurate data with many of the details required in the O-SPEC attribute tables are well outside our wheelhouse? We rely heavily on the information supplied by contractors, engineers, landscapers, and irrigation designers. But it sounds simple, right? They give us the info, we survey the site and the attributes, and we add the attributes. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Sounds simple, right? They give us the information, we survey the site, we add the attributes, and the O-SPEC is good to go, if only. The contractor says, yep, it's built, but they forget to mention that half the layout has changed. The engineer updates the plans, but forgets to send you the latest revision. The landscapers, bless them, their drawings often resemble modern art. They're colourful with arrows going everywhere and cryptic notes, like the one I saw recently. Number 9, allergic, doesn't want tree. Plot twist, they planted that exact same species of tree all down the road, but I digress. Then there's all the detailed drawings, and I mean detailed. I've seen cross-sections of submerged boulders, hopscotch layouts, and a pirate ship. You never quite know if you're opening a design plan or a treasure map. In reality, the information we receive is often either abundant or non-existent, outdated or incorrect, or just plain confusing. But guaranteed, they will not contain all the information required to input in the attribute tables. So what's the first step for the surveyor? Well, he attends site and completes the survey. The data is then processed and then sent to the survey drafting team. This is where the fun begins. The draftee then reviews the design and compares it to the survey. On paper, it looks perfect, but the survey tells a different story. This is when drafting O-SPECs start to feel like a game of spot the difference. So how do we make sense of the chaos? First step is we chase up the missing information, but this isn't as straightforward as it sounds. We often ask for the details, but then it's crickets. And now cue the back and forth, email after email. And if you're lucky, you might finally get the answer that you seek. On the other hand, some contractors treat basic asset information like a state secret, especially when costings are involved. Case in point, Elizabeth Quay. This O-SPEC sat dormant for nearly 5 years, just waiting on costings. Then in 2021, interest in finalising this data was reunited. Since then, the spec was revised, so it was decided to completely redraft it and some parts were resurveyed. So far, it has taken 1,500 hours for the R and O specs combined, which contain approximately 5,000 assets. Elizabeth Key may be the jewel in Perth's crown, but for those of us drafting the spec, it's like the guest that overstays their welcome. But what it really highlighted is what happens when time passes. Companies go out of business, documentation vanishes, and suddenly you're piecing together asset information like a detective. Then you have to liaise with so many consultants. Fortunately for us, somebody located an old USB stick with just enough data to keep us going. Filling in the gaps. Often the information provided on the plans only get us part the way there to filling in these attribute tables. So thankfully, we have the internet. We can obtain model numbers and manufacturing details with ease. Despite trees technically falling under the road specification, we are regularly expected to identify them as part of the O-Spec. Fun fact, surveyors aren't botanists. So it's fabulous when the information is provided on the landscaping plans matches those that were planted. But if there's a substitution, Google Lens is an absolute lifesaver. Snap a photo of the tree, bingo, it tells you what's there. Then we cross-check the landscaping plan to make sure that was actually on the inventory, and we're good to go. We've also found Google Lens handy to identify rogue bike racks, bollards, and playground equipment. The level of detail in the spec can be quite overwhelming to your humble surveyor. Gates, are there chains? Who's the key contact? What's the lock number? I don't know. Public art, who's the artist? Who was it donated by? Is there a plaque? What does it say? What's its value? Was there a risk assessment, an electrical certification? This is a lot of information to confirm. Irrigation. These plans have their own cryptic language. Sprinkler locations, flow paths, control valves. These plans are laid out like the Da Vinci Code. Unfortunately, I'm not Tom Hanks. It's quite a puzzle. Some things are quite simple, like flow conversion from litres per minute to litres per hour. But other things like figuring out the purpose of a solenoid or how many outlets it services involves research and understanding, which can lead you down a rabbit hole. There is a fine line when even educated guesses start to look like fiction, and this is when default values start to appear. But here's the real challenge. How much time should we spend chasing these details, especially when we don't know what details matter to councils? The cost of accuracy. Creating O-Specs take time, skill, and they aren't cheap to generate. Our clients carry the costs, and any delays in delivery can hold up bonds and project progress. At M&G, we've built custom tools to streamline the process to utilise photo georeferencing, create attribute automation, and spec validation. But we are always looking for ways to speed up the process. I know this can be a can of worms, but a point of discussion recently was why are we completing as constructed surveys if councils only seem to be interested in asset management? Because we've heard rumours that other companies may be using just design data. We figure there's other ways to confirm what was constructed, like aerial photography. So if positional accuracy isn't a huge concern, we could be saving time and money for our clients. So let us help us help you. We all can agree values are useless if they don't reflect what's on site. So is the oversupply of data that no one's actually using. We genuinely want to get it right, and that's the whole point of the O-Spec and any of the specs. So what we need is feedback from our local authorities. A retired asset officer told me that he could count on his hand the number of error-free specs he'd seen, and I was fortunate to be one of them. But he also said that I was pedantic. So on one hand, I can produce a perfect spec, but on the other, I was excessively concerned with minor details and perhaps went too far. And this is where we need guidance, as without it, we are left guessing. Are we doing too much or too little? What is everybody else providing? Is the data even getting reviewed? Who can we call at the local councils when we have questions like these? Most of the time, we only hear back when something needs revising. At M&G, we've been keeping a spreadsheet of councils' specific feedback across WA since 2015. It's now 10 years old, and it only contains 65 entries. And of those, 8 only relate to the O-Spec, and of those, 6 relate to irrigation. That's not a whole lot of guidance on something so complex. So any constructive feedback is welcomed. So in conclusion, as surveyors, we do our very best to provide accurate data based on the information that we've been given. And while I pointed out a few of the challenges, I'd also like to acknowledge that at M&G, we are lucky to work with some fantastic engineers, contractors, landscape designers, and many of whom are consortium members. And without their help, we couldn't get the job done. So if a surveyor asks you for a detail that seems oddly specific or insignificant, they are not asking for fun. They are trying to tame the O-Spec beast. And the next time you see a completed O-Spec, please spare a thought for the poor surveyor behind it, who is now cursed with the ability to identify bollards at a glance, recite sprinkler types in their sleep, and still wonders why someone needed a detailed plan for a buried rock. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you my perspective. Do you have any questions?
That was fabulous, Naomi. I love the Frankenstein's monster, but I won't put that in parentheses on the spec, but I totally get it.
Yeah, it does sound rather similar for us as well, George. Although I'm thankful our projects aren't that big and we haven't had anything like Elizabeth Key.
Yes, yeah. No, that was really great. I, picked up a number of things there. I think your point about, what is really required is important. And I was looking through the chat, and I noticed some comment coming back around from Rob, who said every time we tinker with the spec, continual changes degrade the standard. Yes, so we're really mindful of what those changes might be. And your point about what's required for asset management. My lifelong goal, Naomi, is to spatially enable engineers. So they don't really get the importance of the spatial aspect of it. I try to tease them a bit by saying, you know what, your asset's worth nothing. You better start putting a value on your data.
Exactly.
Yes. Now, any questions? Yep, I see a comment from Larry in the chat that says Naomi's presentation is very detailed and could be a guide for any surveyors for other specs. Is it possible to pass the presentation over? Well, Larry, I have some great news. It's all been recorded. So you not only get the presentation, you'll get the dialogue that goes along with it. So once the video is edited, it'll be put onto the YouTube, A-SPEC YouTube site, and you'll have access to it. There's a question in the chat, 2 questions, Naomi. One is, what software do you use?
Okay, so we use MicroStation to do the drafting aspect of it. And then we have created a internal program, MDL, inside it, which has been set up for the specs, and we do updates when the spec gets updated. And that's when we can export out. And then we bring everything into QGIS to make sure it all works.
Okay. Cool. There's also a question about, do you use A-SPEC code list in the field for pickup?
No, we use our standard code list for the field pickup, and then we just use the line work and put all the layers in as per the spec to create the attribute table stuff.
Yep, understand. Now, there's a follow-up question to that, but that's more directed at us. If so, where can I get the code list to use in the field pickup? So there's a couple of ways that you can access that. On the website, there is a master spreadsheet of all the code lists and the associated codes to be used. And also, you may want to go to your, if you're a surveyor or using surveying equipment, go to your provider of your equipment and ask them if they have libraries set up for A-SPEC. Yep. So what else? Great presentation. Yeah. Surely we can put you on as an expert now, Naomi.
Oh, I don't know.
You know, with the volume of data that you've been capturing and the complexity of it, I'm almost going to have you as a standing item in our forums to come and say, you know, here's what we've discovered next.
Unfortunately, we don't do as many O-specs as we do the R&D specs. So it's been quite interesting to revisit the O-spec, because I probably only do one every 10 R-specs. So it's not that common.
Yes. Understand. Also, I noticed Trevor King, a former colleague of yours.
Yeah, my mentor.
Yes, there you go. He's still A-SPECing. He's mentoring someone else.
Yeah.
Now, Trevor, I think I don't know if he's got volume on his device that he's on, but he was the first person at MNG to deliver D-SPEC data, and from that time, which is about 2007, 2008, we've always had something interesting to talk about, Naomi. So, Trevor, if you've got, I know you don't like getting on and talking about stuff in the public domain, but anything you'd like to type in or take yourself off mute to talk about the early days, what that was like?
No, not really. I think Naomi covered it very well. That's a very good presentation, Naomi.
Thanks,
nice
buddy.
job.
Thank you.
Just highlights the issues that we, as the surveyors and the draftees, have in trying to get the data all put together for the councils to utilise in their systems. And like Naomi said, we're always after feedback, good or bad, so that we know what we can improve on. I mean, if we know what we're doing right, then it makes our job a lot easier, because a lot of times, like Naomi said, we're just making educated guesses and hoping that that's what the council wants. So for all you councils out there that are listening to this, if you can provide feedback on every spec that you get, whether it's even just it's good job, bad job, just so we know, so we can make it easier for us and make it quicker and better for you guys at the end. That's pretty much all I've got.
Yeah, it's something similar with us as well. It seems to be very much a case of no news is good news.
100%.
Yes. No, that's all great. Naomi, that was fabulous. Thank you.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
the effort that you've taken to go into that. You've set the bar high for Chris. So we'll see how he comes in and complements with his A-SPEC presentation next week. So thanks again, and very much appreciate your contribution to this forum.
You're very welcome. Thank you, George.
Alrighty, so let's kick on. So we're in the wrap up. So crowdsourcing for codes, we've spoken about. We have an API that we've been talking about that was developed for code lists. Unfortunately, we changed platforms and it's under reconstruction, and I haven't got an update on when that would be completed. But as soon as it is, we'll let everybody know, and that may actually be quite useful in providing the ability to capture the codes out in the field as well. Okay, so continuous improvement. Rob, going back to your point about continual ongoing changes degrade the standard. Happy to have a conversation about that either now or offline, up to you as to how you want to address that going forward. I'm interested in your feedback. Arthur, also interested in, you have a marine asset spec. That's very exciting. I will be talking to you about that. Alam, you said, hi George, when will it be available for us? Can I assume that you were talking about the crowdsourcing tool for the code generator? I'll let you respond in the chat to that while I go through. Yes, great. So it's in. We've asked our web support team to embed it into the A-SPEC website behind a login. So I'm expecting to hear something today so that we can start testing it, and you'll be at the top of the list to get access to it, Alam. I know you've been asking about the API for some time now, but we anticipate getting this to you sooner rather than later. Okay, so the new specification, A-SPEC, it's taking form. We're almost at the point of putting a draft out for comment. So A-SPEC is around providing asset types that don't naturally fit in other specifications. So we've started with this one, flammable combustible liquid containers. Came out of an inquiry from City of Nedlands who said, we got fuel tanks. George, how do we capture it? So we had something for fuel and something for tanks. So now we've created something that not only covers fuel tanks, but covers other combustible liquids. Similarly to your comment, Naomi, about swimming pools, I'll have to do some research and I'll get back to you about that one. So where we're at with A-SPEC is we're looking at some other guides. We've done some research about the kind of standards that are around. We're not going to all we're going to do is point you towards them around the kind of things that need to be taken into account. They don't actually form part of the asset recording, but it's things to take into account. As you can see there, separation distances for storage tanks. We've got a series of attributes. We've got the data structures. We're looking at a slightly different structure for A-SPEC, and we'll deliver that, and we'll use that as an opportunity to possibly restructure the look of the tables in the specifications. So keep a lookout for that. And just to reiterate, there will be no cost to this spec. This will be a complimentary spec to everybody who currently subscribes to one or more of the A-SPEC data suites. So next forum. And I'm going to finish off with a few polls, so I request you stay with us until the end. So our guest next week is Chris Pienaar, a survey draftsman with MNG. So man after my own heart. I trained as a survey draftsman at Melbourne Water when it was the Border Works. So very keen to see how he approaches things. I've known Chris for some time, and he's definitely the new kid on the block, and will take us through how they approach their A-SPEC environment. You can see the next forum, same kind of format. So now we enter, there's going to be 5 mentees that we'd like you to respond to. So this is the first one. We've always had the rule, this isn't about just presenting everything that's perfect. This is about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And Naomi, I really appreciated the honesty and frankness of your presentation, because if those kind of issues are not raised, it creates a false expectation of that things are actually easy to do. But what you've actually indicated is that with a process and with the right amount of training, you can achieve a pretty good outcome. Actually, not a pretty good outcome, a very good outcome. So I'll continue on with the forum with these mentees so that we can finish right on scheduled close time. So please access this. Thank you for all your comments and contributions. So this next one is for Naomi's presentation. Okay, so this will continue on, and look, we want to know the kind of things that you want to see at the forums. Last week we asked, what kind of things do you want to see in the following forums, and there was a conversation about data for capital works. If the person that put that comment there is on today, if it hit the mark, please let us know. If it didn't hit the mark, please let us know. We also had a comment about surveying standard. I quietly shied away from that, but I'm happy to have a conversation about the context around surveying standard. So we'll just move on to the next one. Again, thank you again for your participation in the mentees. Here's something of interest. Love to know. Yep, 2008, great. 2020, 2020, great. So we've got some newbies. I'd imagine that's you, Naomi. 2020. Trevor, I'd imagine that's you. 2008, 2022, 2020. Wow. So as recent as last year. That's fantastic. So we've got a good spread of, apologies for that. So we've got a good spread of responses there. Fantastic. Okay, this one. We've deployed a new format this year. It's half an hour shorter. This week we had a presentation. Next week we'll have a presentation. The following week we'll have a fireside chat. So we're always looking at the kind of things that we can address during the forums. These are your forums. Yes, I present to them. We invite people like Naomi to present, and Chris and others. However, they're your forums. We're really interested to know what kind of thing do you want to spend your time attending to. I'm sure there's lots of things that you could have been doing today, but you spent the time to come here, and I acknowledge everyone for doing that. So if there's something that is missing that you would like to see, we want to know about it. So here's where you get a chance. What additional areas would you like to discuss? It doesn't have to be a technical area. It may be something about resolving disputes. It's not uncommon for us to be asked to resolve a conversation of between an asset owner and the developer. Certification, license surveyor, sign off. Okay, that's great. There is no requirement for a licensed surveyor to sign off on A-SPEC data. Typically, we find that it's done, sign off is from engineering surveyors. You may have a licensed surveyor or a registered surveyor as part of company, and that's okay. That might be your process, but it's not a requirement to have a licensed surveyor sign it off. If you're going to be measuring from title because you've got to re-establish the title, then obviously you need somebody who's authorised to do that. However, for the most part, engineering surveying is the requirement. What do councils actually use the data for? Okay, that's a really valid point, and you want to see how the data is used. Okay, I love it. So we always advocate that council, this data is being captured from an asset management perspective. Okay, so that they can advocate what kind of forward works planning they need to do. I'll have a look to see. I'll have a look to see what kind of some people from council that may be prepared to come and talk, have a mini fireside chat with me next week as part of the wrap up. Common validation errors on AC/DC portal and solutions. It's not an area that I cover. I recommend that you speak directly to OpenSpatial about that. And if it's something to do specifically with your submission, I think it's more valuable to do that. Some of the common, what I can talk about is some of the common validation errors that we see is that people applying a default value rather than looking at what the actual value is going to be, or people applying NA rather than actually chasing up what the attribute value is to be. Great, more feedback, presentations from the councils. Cool, we will do that. For the local networking for authorities and consultants. Okay, I'm all ears as to how we can promote that. So again, thanks very much. It's your feedback is very much appreciated. If I have not covered off these particular points, please don't hesitate to contact me for a follow-up. I will, for next week, I will endeavour to get somebody from a council to talk to us through the wrap-up session and probably this session about what the data is actually used for. I can give you examples of how data is being used in New Zealand from the work that we did over there, but we'll look at something local. Again, it's 11:35. Thank you to everybody who has stayed on. Appreciate you. Appreciate you committing the extra 5 minutes. I just saw a quick message from Philip Nell, who is from OpenSpatial, to contact him regarding regarding ACDC portal and solutions. And Philip has put his email address in there. Please use that to contact him directly. Aside from that, I'll be on for another 10 minutes. For anybody who'd like to stay on, take yourself off chat, take yourself off camera, have a conversation with me. Thank you again. Look forward to seeing the people who are registered for A-SPEC next week. Have a great rest of the day.